It's Bassette. Bassette.
Bassette?
Yeah, EJ Bassette, the Edge. But like spaghetti, but with the B.
I love it. Spaghetti. I will forever remember that. I love it. I love it. And Adele DiMarco here. So we are first time meeting and having this completely authentic conversation. And I know we were just talking about focus for a moment, and you were talking about your books, multiple books.
Yes, and the family brand.
Yeah, and the family brand. I loved watching your show that you're launching.
Okay, so you saw Bassette, the Bassette, come and hang out with the Bassettes.
Come and hang out with the Bassettes. I love it. And what a beautiful family you have with your son Mario and two daughters, Deanna and Dominique, and your gorgeous wife Donna.
Wow, you actually watched it. I'm impressed.
Oh yeah, I watched the whole thing. I love it.
Yeah. Well, that's a concept that when I started speaking, because I've been speaking off and on for over 30 years now.
Wow.
And it started way back in my late 20s. And part of it was when my wife and I met. So that's my college sweetheart.
That's such a beautiful story.
And when we met, I made a promise to her that if she went back to work and carried the insurance, I would be home every day at 2:30 to take care of the children. So that's where it's not just being a speaker, but we had to think about the family in the whole process. So one of the things that I did, Adele, was I had to, being a sales guy, I was in corporate sales. I had to sell her on what would be the value I would bring to our three children if I'm at home with them. And so I convinced her, and finally it came down, her concern was, well, they have homework, they have, when they get home from school, they have snacks. Are you gonna be able to handle this?
Right.
So I promised her, I said, I'll do it and I'll be committed to it. So she would come home and I would have an apron on.
Wow.
And I have tears in my eyes. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I've just cleaned up and these kids have messed up.
Welcome to her world.
I said, all you want to do is come home and have dinner on the stove. What about me? Concerns. And so it became a role reversal. So I would either speak early in the morning or I would speak after she got home. But I created a business that was local to Chicago.
Wow.
Because I had to be there for the children.
Oh.
Now that they're grown, they blessed me with saying, Dad, since you were there for us, now we want to be there for you. And we all want to live our passions, but at the same time, we want to work together as a family. So that's what we decided to do.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And really, I will say, Edge, really the way of the future. That you are really the emerging edge, shall we say, of the future. And it feels so synchronous in terms of my passion and work in the world, which is to really support harmonizing through the heart, I call it.
Yes.
But harmonizing the world of work and the world of home. Yeah. And I can relate because I call it an entrepreneur by default, initially, not by desire, because similar but different from your story. When I was in my late 20s, I had been kind of raised to be an independent woman, right? And back then in the 70s and 80s, that meant either become a doctor or a lawyer. Those were like the two top accomplishments. And so as I was in my 20s and was on the track to become a doctor, I saw my girlfriends who had become doctors and lawyers, and they got married. And as they started to have kids, they had no flexibility or option. They either had to choose career or family. Right. And so I realized I got off that bus, that MD bus, and I ended up going to business school. But even then with business school, I was like, all the companies didn't really have great family
Right.
support.
Work-life balance and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, work-life balance. I'm even over that term too. I won't go down that road, but because it's more, to me, it's work-home balance, because
Yeah.
work is part of your life, right?
Exactly. Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I realized, I mean, I was on track to work for the big consulting firms where they, start you off at 6 figures and you take airplanes like taxi cabs, being from Chicago,
Yeah.
that's a big industry there, the consulting world. And
Right.
I said, I'm the only way I could see, I wasn't even married or had children yet, but I knew that that's what I wanted for my life. I was like, I have to become an entrepreneur so I can structure my life so that I can be home for family and be as attentive as I can.
Yeah. 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 And it makes a big difference. I mean, and especially being an African American male and being in a role where I came from the inner city. So my formative years was engulfed with all the issues that young people have today.
Wow.
Dealing with the violence, I remember going to school and thinking that I wasn't going to live long enough to get to college. That was a concern of mine in high school, and overcoming some of those odds to saying, okay, this is the type of male that I want to be and represent, and family was the at the forefront of that, and still is, and still is. And that's it. So, and it's not just showing that, like you say, that family's in the center, but from a male standpoint and African American male standpoint, to represent that um, if we work together with our significant others, you may make sacrifices, but in the end, you win as a family. So we were able to. One of my goals was when I got into corporate America and I was exposed to some of my peers. A big thing that I wanted to do was send my kids to college. That was a big thing. That was one of the American dreams, to be able to send them to college and not have any debt when they started out. And so we were able to send all three of them to college, get their first bachelor's degrees, and then um, and keep them from getting those credit cards, because they would call home from school and say, hey, they just sent me this thing in the mail and I can spend all the money I want for free.
It's very enticing.
Yeah. Yeah. So my oldest daughter, she's a nurse practitioner. She works for one of the big hospitals in Chicago, and she runs a program there. And my son's an engineer, and he's electrical, but he does all the branding for us.
Beautiful.
So she's a health coach, the oldest. He does all the branding and does everything for us. And then my youngest, she's on about 4 or 5 international magazines this month, fashion. So she has her own fashion line. This is her logo, Bassette. This is her actual hat, and she's on magazine covers where she's made her own seat at the table, and so she does some beautiful work, and so we're really, really proud. So, and then my wife, of course, she's a project manager, and then she writes the children's books. So she has her brand, and then I have my books and my brand. So I said, let's merge all this together and show from uh, let's showcase that her mom. I mean, we came from the inner city, my wife and myself, from the worst area in Chicago, and within one generation, now we're able to take the kids and say, okay, no excuses, let's move forward. And then we want the grandchildren to take it to the next level and move. And that's the way you change the legacy. So that's part of, you're working the plan, you're doing the plan, you're living the plan, and it's all part of the success strategy. I'll give you a perfect example.
Please.
Divorce was not an option in my life. I found my college sweetheart and I said, we're going to make this work. I hold her hand every night when we go to bed. And when we wake up in the morning, I hold her hand again. And I say, girl, let's go on a date. And that's 38 years now.
Oh my goodness.
And if you commit yourself to something bigger than yourself, bigger than who you are, regardless of what it is, whether it's your children, whether it's your life, whether it's the people outside of your life, it can work because it's just not about me. It's about the institution of what we're doing. And that's the way I decided to live my life. And I told her when we met, she was in an abusive relationship before. And so this beautiful young lady, and she was telling me about these different people. And I said, that'll never happen again in your life. And I said, when we get to the end of your life, one day you'll look back and say, I had a good life with this man. And we were 21 at that time. So that was 38 years ago. And I stuck to that premise. I've stuck to that. And I try to share with young people too. When you find something, the success of it is the longevity of doing it. It's not a flash in the pan doing it one time, but it's consistency throughout the life of what you're doing.
And that is such deep wisdom. And to me, as I hear you say that, Edge, it really rings true in terms of the concept of family. So I would ask you, in what ways do you see is the connection between what you just said about longevity and consistency, really, of commitment?
Yes.
And the word family.
What I see is one, just what I said, the consistency of it, of saying, okay, we're in it, like with my kids. I thought it was tough being in business, but when you're in business with your daughter, who's, she's used to the dad daughter relationship, and she's spoiled. That's why we're recording stuff, because I said we have to show people the good, and we have to show them that it's a process.
Yes. Not a problem, but a process.
It's a process, right? Of us working together, understanding each other's language, personality styles. I mean, I'm using everything I can out of, like, we're each other's first projects in a way, because like tomorrow we have a family meeting and we get on and we talk about what's going on with each business, and everybody gives an update, and we have to share and listen. And I have to listen not as a dad, but as a partner, a business partner. So the commitment has to be there for that, and the commitment has to be there to want to see again the bigger picture of what we're doing, knowing that if we can help one family, if we can help one person, part of it is being authentic with what you're trying to do. Like when I was younger, I thought I was a football player. I was an athlete, so everything was external. It was more, I looked more at, oh yeah, I used to tell people, oh, I'm a cross between Denzel Washington and, and everything was external. Everything was the smile and the looks, and you knew that you were physically like a specimen. As you get older and reflective, it's more about having the capacity to really understand where people are at, and can you help them? Can you really? My biggest thing is really being there for the people that we need to be there for, and actually having information and knowledge and wisdom and understanding and depth and humility to help.
Wow.
So yeah, and it comes down to even like my granddaughter, she's 4, and I have to get on one knee and look her in the eye, and she says, "Papa," she say, you're so strong. Like yesterday, she said, you're so strong. Because I opened up a can for my wife. You know, my wife bought her. Oh, you know how she said, "Oh, can you open this?" And I just popped to open up, and my grandbaby was here. She's like, "Papa, you are just so strong." She said, "You so." Then she went, she said, "How'd you get so strong?" I said, "Well, work out every day, but I have to talk to her and sit and just look at her." And I hit her little muscle. I said, you're pretty strong too. Look at those little muscles there. And her eyes light up, and she's just like, because I'm talking to her, I'm not ignoring what she's saying.
Yeah, you're really connecting, it sounds like,
connecting
with her spirit.
Exactly, and being present, and knowing
Yes.
that you need to be present, and knowing that that's what's required, and it's not the, oh, how many followers I have, how many people are following me on this, and how many people are doing this. It's, can you do this for one person when that person needs you? Can you be there for them?
Oh,
And that's the one thing I've learned.
that is so powerful in terms of what really to prioritize. I have a question about something that you shared in your story when you were just a moment ago talking about now that you're in business with your family, right? So you are, do you consider yourself officially a family business?
Exactly.
And
Bassette Solutions LLC.
I love it. I love it. Congrats. So I'm really curious. You talked about being in conversation with your daughter. Is it Dominique, the youngest?
Yeah, Dominique, right?
Dominique. And yes. I heard you say you had to switch from being in a father role to being in a business partner role. Can you tell me and our listeners a little bit about what's that like internally? Like, what's your process inside yourself to make that switch?
You really want to know this?
I mean, I'm just following my curiosity. I got to tell you that.
Oh God. Well,
I mean, because because my clients, the people I work with are family business. So this is the magic of how do you learn how to be family and business at the same time? Because that is not a tall order. That takes a very special type of person and mindset.
Yeah. And it has moved me to tears sometimes, where it's the tears of joy and also tears of, can I do it? Like being humble and understanding each other, and really learning trust from different aspects of, well, she has a client and she deals with say a young rapper that she's doing something for. Is mom and dad going to get in the way and mess that up because we just don't understand? We're trying to say, you still have to have these business principles and these contracts in place so that you don't do any work that someone is not going to fully pay for. And it's taking patience, it's taking stepping back sometimes and letting mistakes happen so that she can see, okay, they were saying this from a place of love and not a place of just being parents. And so it takes a lot. It takes a lot for all three, because they're all different in different places. And my wife has to remind me, okay, you have to listen at this, because you're talking from a dad standpoint and not from a business standpoint. So I, being a male and being the like physically tallest and biggest, I have to take a step back. And sometimes I'll tell her, you run this meeting, and these are the points I want that I would like you to share, because you come from a different point of it. And I'm using like I said, everything that I've learned from corporate America, from life in Chicago, from the inner city, from the voice of people like Les Brown to, I mean, I use it all, trying to figure out, okay, and a lot of prayer too. A lot of prayer, because my sincere bottom line effort is I want to leave something better than I started it at. And so it comes down to understanding, what am I trying to do? You know, it's no ego involved at this point. It's no, um, like I even tell them, I love doing things for you guys before I even do it for myself, because I've been out there before. I've seen the bright lights. I've been on TV before. I've been one of the best and brightest in corporate America back when I was younger. I enjoy seeing my wife write her books now. I'm enjoying pushing them, but I tell them all the time, you have to be sure and sincere about why you're doing it.
Mm.
Because if you're not doing it for the right reason, because you're going to attract certain people, and you're going to attract all type of people in all type of situations. And I've been in situations where I had, like one of the saddest days, my wife, I was getting big, and I spoke, and this is going back 20 something years ago. It was a huge mega church in Chicago that Les Brown used to speak at. Mm. And every time he was in Chicago, he was known for speaking here. And he was at his height. I mean, he had just spoke in front of 80,000 people in the Atlanta Dome. But every time he was in Chicago, he was at this church. And it was like, I say, 4,000 or 5,000 people. I said I was going to speak at that church. People say, you are crazy. Nobody gets to speak there except if you are one of these super TD Jakes, Oprah in Chicago, you one of these people. I was speaking at a school with a principal, and the principal at the school was one of the top people at the church. So I spoke for him, and he said, man, he said, we got to get you. He said, we got to get you at this church. And so one of the top people from there called and had a meeting with me and pulled me to the church and said, we want you here to speak on our youth Sunday. But it's the same audience. It's just speaking to the young people for their youth day. And so that dream manifested itself, but it brought all sort of notoriety. And my wife, and this is what the point I was making, my wife asked me, she said, you're not going to leave us now, are you? Because she saw this success. And I said, why would you think that? I said, at 2:30 tomorrow, I'll be at home with my apron on, taking care of the kids. And we were talking about that event about a couple of weeks ago. And she said, you know, it's amazing that you stayed true to your family when you were getting all of these offers to go around the country. And I said, yeah, I would be an internationally known speaker if I would have just went on my own, but I wouldn't have you. And that's where you have to stay true. And that's what I was telling my family. You have to stay true to what you started out with. Because I have a lot of people, because you come up with certain people. And I have a lot of guys that I know that's very successful. I mean, they're very, very well but they're not married anymore. But they have a career. They had a career where part of my story is that I took the career and said, that's secondary to these 4 other people. So.
You were very, very clear about your priorities.
Yeah. And I stayed there regardless of what opportunities, because opportunities came. And I had one national TV show say, you are crazy. We're getting ready to put you on national TV, national market. And it was one of the hottest talk shows in the country at the time. But the format and what they wanted me to do wasn't standing for what my brand was. I turned them down.
Wow.
And so I know exactly, and I laugh about it now. When I talk to people, I say, oh, I knew exactly what I could have done, but I wouldn't have these 4 people that's in my life. And I have plenty of friends that went on the road for weeks and weeks. And they would say, come with us. And I say, man, how are you going to stay married like that? I couldn't comprehend it.
Yeah.
The two something had to give. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, I can't just go for weeks and weeks and weeks. I said, I have to be home every night, taking care. I said, maybe I can leave a night every now and then. But when I did, I thought I could travel a little when I was, my kids turned into being teenagers. I came home, it was people in my house I had never seen before. I saw some lady, she's up there drinking a Coke in my kitchen. Who are you?
Maybe it's time to stay even closer to home when they're teenagers.
That's what I did. I said, oh, this is not working. I mean, the time I made the most money in my life was probably the worst family time, because I had started traveling a little bit because I thought they were old enough to travel. And it was like the preacher's kid, when the preacher's gone. I mean, my kids were like, Daddy's not here.
Let's go.
They're like, we know what to do now. This dude not picking us up from school.
Wow.
So that was one of the worst experiences we had with our kids, was when I went on the road. I would come home. Everybody had a cell phone. When cell phones first came out, every kid, we were paying. I was like, all this money is leaving the house. I was like, we make less money than we had with one income now, because
of the increased expenses.
Yeah, everybody, it was just like cars, cell phones. I don't know if they were giving money to people. I don't know what was going on. I was like, I got to get control of this. And so, yeah, it was funny. I joke with them about it now, but so we've been through a lot as far as learning what works and what doesn't work. And money just, we're a family where we have never needed for anything, but we've never said we got to go out and just chase money to make it work.
Wow. I really respect that wisdom. And I also wanted to respect time, because we're bumping up against time and even a conversation about money. It's synchronous that you brought up that topic of money, because relatedly, I had 2 questions for you that I wanted to ask, but I want to check in with time because it is 1:01. And
I'm fine. I don't think anybody has ever, I did one interview and they're like, man, we went over like 30 minutes, but it was so much fun. We couldn't stop. So I'm on your time.
Okay. Well, I'll be attentive. No longer than a whole hour, start to finish. So the subject of money, and I love what you're sharing, Edge, in terms of what I'm hearing you really say is how clear you were on your internal priorities.
Yes.
Right. And I know in terms of working with spirit, working with the infinite, working with God, one of the laws is the law of sacrifice, which is quite simply sacrificing the lesser for the greater. And when I hear you saying that you were very, very clear that the lesser for you was the career, and regardless of how much money potentially was going to come with that, and the greater for you was family, and not just family, but being home.
Yes.
And being, especially even as your kids got older.
Yes. And we're big on, probably the best work that my wife and I did was when our kids were in college. When my wife was still very involved, because as she told each one of them, if you fail a class, we have to pay for it. So we're going to make sure that she sat there and she, it was not that you're 18 and you're on your own. It was, we're going to help you all the way. Like I said, credit cards, making decisions. I can see her with my daughter, who's a nurse practitioner. Every class, just sitting with her before the year started and going over what she needed to take, what she wanted to take, why, what's the best way to go, even career. Like they always discussed everything. And
Wow.
all made a difference because I hear a lot of people just cutting the bait at 18 and saying you're on your own. And I think a lot of times the family structure needs to be there. Like my daughter, the one that's in Chicago now, um, she calls, I swear she calls it 3 times a day at the minimum because they talk about everything. And that structure just never stops. It's, the whole, it takes a village.
Yes.
Yeah. And so part of it is the priority. As we get older, um, we share with them that it's not about, we have all the information that you guys need. That's why they want to work with us now is to get the resources that we've accumulated mentally to try to help make their lives easier instead of taking all of that information and not using it, and not having that, because the Black community, I have to say this, I'll preface with this. Some, people say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but some people don't have boots to pull themselves up with.
Right.
So our community doesn't have the same resources that allow you to go into different avenues and have people pull you up. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in corporate America, some of my peers, if they would leave a company and go to a better situation, they would pull people with them.
Yes, very common practice. Kind of like their team, they would take.
Right. The circle that I was in, even though I was a great guy and I was one of the most successful, I've never been pulled by anyone to another company.
Now, were you typically the only Black man in your team?
Yeah.
Was it mostly white people who you worked with?
Right. Yeah. And they never pulled me. And some guys, I thought maybe it's my number or they're not getting, I'm actually calling them, hey man, I want to come too. And you just don't get a call back.
Wow.
So I had instances, like my first book, in telling my story, even though I was successful, it caused a lot of issues because it was like, okay, this had to be a fluke. I would have people complain about me being successful in sales. And that
other people inside the company?
Yeah, the people, yeah, my peers.
Yeah, because they were threatened and jealous of you?
Yeah, they were tired of me winning. I was a top salesman in the country for a Fortune 500 company, and that caused a lot of backlash to me.
I'm sure from the white folks who you work with.
Exactly. And so that was part of my story, was that I had to keep moving, even though me personally, the success was not doing what it was doing for my peers. But I still used it to my advantage because it parlayed me into a speaking career.
So if I hear what you're saying, right, I want to make sure I understand, because we didn't talk about this, but part of the work I do in the world as well is racial equity in the workplace. And along with my dear friend and partner, Erica Merritt, who's a Black woman. So we are a cross-racial team, and we go into the workplace to talk specifically about race and racism in the workplace.
Okay.
So on that, I want it through that lens of my understanding as a white woman in the business world in America, is what would happen is, even if I understand you right, even though you were extremely successful, I mean, to be top sales in a Fortune 500 company is like a top of a top of a top.
Exactly.
Right. And what I hear you saying is your success would actually start to cause a problem because of the way, meaning I would make of it is because of all of the subconscious incoherence with people's belief about what it meant to be Black. And then on top of it, what it meant to be white. I mean, being white means I'm supposed to be the better one. Right. So you would have to go and find another place to be because your success would start to create problems.
Exactly. I did a speaking engagement. I just looked at, I've been speaking so long. I was speaking back when they had the cassette tapes, remember?
Oh yeah.
And so I found a thing of cassette tapes. It's kind of funny because uh, I found these in my garage, like hundreds of them from my old speaking days. Because it's almost like living two different lives. So when we moved to Atlanta, I had to go through all of this stuff. And when I got to the storage unit, I was like, what are all these tapes? And this is back in January of 2020. So before the pandemic. And we were just talking about, I was in Atlanta, didn't get a transfer from my last company. So I was going to look for a new position in corporate sales. And I was in the storage room and I saw these tapes. And at the same time, I don't know if you remember one of these things.
Oh yes.
This was my dad. This was my dad's, a boombox, right? It was sitting, this is a true story. It was, so I had the tape. I had a tape and I was like, man, what is that? And I looked over in the corner and that boombox was sitting in a box. And that was my late dad's radio from 15 years ago that I had never opened. So I plugged it in, stuck the tape in, and it was a speaking tape. And I literally started crying in the storage unit because it didn't break, it didn't do anything. And I said, and my wife had just started talking about me not going back in corporate America and just helping with the family business. And I said, if I get all of these tapes, if they actually work, I don't have to prove that I used to speak. I have all of this material. So I went into one of them and I was listening to it. And see, it says all this stuff here. And it's talking about E.J. Edge Bassette, Silent Cry, which is the first book that I wrote. And this book, it says the key to stopping the violence. But inside of the book, the guy who wrote the foreword, his name was Charles Whitaker, and he's a professor at Northwestern University.
Wow.
And he said, basically, that EJ found out that when he thought he escaped the inner city, that corporate America dealt the biggest blows, because regardless of where you were at, you were still a Black person in that society.
Right.
He talks about that in the foreword. And this book, I've had people say, man, this could be used as a living document of how corporate America, how what do you call diversity? Because here's some of the chapters in it, just so you'll get an idea.
Yeah, please. I'm very curious.
Because it's very, okay, this is corporate America. The same year that I was a top salesman for the Fortune 500,
yeah,
friend from 5 years old, my best friend who told me that one day we were going to make it out of the inner city, he was murdered the same year I was a top salesman. So the book is about us coming of age. And I was trying to, even though I was the best salesman in the country, I couldn't save him. I couldn't sell him on life. And that's what the story is about. But in this, some of the chapters is called Corporate America 101, Endangered Species, which is talking about African Americans. You could relate to this title here. Let me see, job search. That's when I would go on interviews and the headhunters would look at my resume and they say, man, based on your resume, I can get you an interview anywhere. So they sent me to this, all of my peers since I was working for a pharmaceutical company as a top salesman in the country, my next goal was to work in the pharmaceutical, but selling major medical equipment, like the big X-ray machines, all that. So when I started going on those interviews, they didn't interview Black people for those interviews.
They flat out said it.
They said that I was in one interview. He said, I have never interviewed a Black candidate. He said, how did you even get in here?
I mean, I'm not surprised. It's just amazing.
Oh, it was just
the blatancy.
But the recruiters, the recruiters who were white, they had never experienced that level of racism until they had a person, and they couldn't understand it because they said, based on who you are and what you have, they saw through my lens that they were so upset that this was happening. But then
because the hiring person couldn't see past the color of your skin, even for their own advancement, knowing the level of capacity you had as a salesperson. They couldn't see past the color of your skin.
Exactly. So I said, work the secret ingredient. That's a chapter. Closing the deals. Race always part of the game. Winning the prize. A cold corporate lesson. These are all little, a new beginning, a new experience, family values over corporate dreams. That's when I decided to leave corporate America and work in the speaking industry. Back in the neighborhood, because I had to go back, because I had a dual life at the time. I was successful personally, but I was going through my own problems with people in the corporation that I work for, but yet I'm still going back to the neighborhood, trying to uplift people there, telling them you could make it.
Right, of course. Wow.
Yeah, so it was like, so in one case, they want me to go to therapy because corporate America, they said, well, something must be wrong with you because you're complaining about wanting to move up. And so they wanted to send me to therapy. And yet I'm going back and trying to save my best friends and say, hey, man, you could make it. But I'm looking at it and going, man, who could deal with this? Who could deal with this up and down? So it was a story that I wanted to tell. But at the end of it, it's family. It was this beautiful woman who said, hey, whatever we do, as long as we do it together. It was balancing. It was having God in my life. It was having other things and valuing myself over and above just the money part of it. But I had a friend, I had a guy who worked with me for years, and he admires me. I said, but you know, and we were talking about a month ago. I said, you never helped me move from one. I said, you've always been a manager, a VP. I said, you've never asked me one time. I said, I've asked you to pull me up.
He's a white man.
Yeah. And because he was asking me after the George Floyd thing, what could people do? I said, you guys keep asking us what you should do, but you have all of the power and the influence. I said, you know what to do. Do for me what you do for yourself. See,
it's so simple. It's like the nose on your face.
Right. I said, you know what it is. I said, you know exactly what it is because you have the power to do it. I said, we don't have the same infrastructure to do that. So those are the complicated parts. But out of all of that, what I was able to do was take those stories. I have a lot of them on, I'm putting them on YouTube now.
Awesome. I saw your YouTube channel is really growing.
Yeah, so I'm trying to put on, because there's two different ones. It's EJ Bassette, and then you got Bassette Solutions, which has all of our stuff. So I'm doing two different stations at the same time. But what I'm trying to do is walk the thin line between being fun, giving a message, but making the message where it has a content to it where people understand that it's not a walk in the park, but it's just like anything else. If you dedicate yourself to what you need to do, you focus on it, you put the right people in place, it's enough people out here that can help you get to where you need to go. But then you have to reach back and help somebody else make that same journey.
Absolutely.
And so yeah.
As you have so beautifully done. I mean, I'm so grateful our conversation edge ended up where it did around, I mean, one, talking about family first and foremost, and your incredible journey. And then also talking about race and racism and in corporate America. And what I've been curious about, and you're kind of this living testament to this, is the notion of family business as an antidote to racism in this country on some levels, in terms of for Black America, perhaps.
Well, let me tell you why. Yeah, I can explain that, because that's exactly why we're doing this here. When I came up with this theory, I said this is going to be the new way that Black America can help save itself, because what we can do is, like I said, some people look at it and say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but that's if the major economy is helping you pull yourself up.
Instead of pulling you back down, which now that we're starting to wake up, I call last summer, I call 2020 after George Floyd's murdered and Breonna Taylor, et cetera. I call it the Great White Awakening, right? That all of a sudden white people were like, oh, racism is real, right?
Right.
And we're still helping people understand this concept of structural racism, where the economy is actually designed, that's what racism is, to not only disadvantage Black people, all people of color, but especially Black people, and simultaneously advantage white folks, which there's such a blind spot around it. That's a big part of what I do as a white person.
Well, I tell people like this. I said, I don't go around every day thinking about the starving kids in Africa, because it's not in my view, or I don't think about, I say we think about what affects us. So now that that's what we think about, what we have to do, and I've always been sort of an ambassador, because I've always been the Black guy in the office.
And amongst all the white folks, you're the diversity that makes everybody feel good that they've at least got that guy.
Right. And so I've answered a lot of questions, and for African Americans, I've been the guy who has been extremely proud to be from the inner city, because I tell such a hilarious story about my upbringing, and I've been able to take it and make it digestible for anybody that wanted to listen to it. So doing that, because you're not only selling African Americans, you're selling the dominant community on what you're doing also. So in that, I would always have to come up with a way to say, okay, I'm a sales guy, so how can I share my message where it's not threatening to a person, but it gets the point across? So one, they had to see me as a family guy, because family was non-threatening. And then let me tell you, you want me to show you my second secret?
Yes.
I'm gonna show you the secret to everything. Just stay right there.
Okay.
See him?
Oh, hi.
This is Bosco.
Hi, Bosco.
So that's Bosco. Now you may say, well, what does Bosco have to do? Okay, people unite around things that they have in common.
Yes.
When people don't want to speak to me, guess who they want to speak to? Bosco. I told my wife, I said, this may be he might be the secret to race relations. Because everybody loves dogs.
Yes.
More people speak to me when I'm with that big-headed dog, because they see something in common. I've never had so many people, I'm talking about whites, blacks, blue, green, whoever, because he's the common link between a conversation.
Yes.
So
I love it.
Atlanta, everybody wants to know, what kind of dog is that? Where'd you get him from? Where? Because he's from Russia.
Ooh, what kind of dog what's his breed?
He's a Croatian mountain dog.
He's stunning.
Yeah, so he's 135 pounds.
He's a good match for you. You know what I mean? Like you're the same scale.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm being totally serious where I try to find unique ways. When I take him on a dog path or take him out, he's a conversation starter, and it breaks down people who want to have a conversation, but don't know how. So that speaks to my next, because I'm doing we're coming up with two online classes. One is
cool.
my sales training class.
I'm sorry, your what training class?
A sales training.
Oh, perfect.
But it's everybody's a salesperson. It's not just sales. It's not just corporate sales. But
it's like sales is life kind of course.
Exactly. That everybody needs to get there. Yes, whether you're dealing with your children when they're kids and you're trying to get them to eat, to negotiating with your significant other about what vacation you're going to go to. My wife would always tell me, "Stop trying to sell me." She said, "I know what you're doing." Because I would go to a training with with one of the top trainers in the country, one of those corporate events, and you come back and you want to use this information. So I would say, we do want that, don't we? So that's what my second book was about. This one is called Practice What You Preach.
Oh, awesome.
This one says, Brian Tracy, it says, this wonderful book gives you a step-by-step formula to improve your life and realize your dreams. So this was this book was what I experienced.
Silent cry.
And this book is what I know. Practice what you preach. And practice is, what would we be if we all could just do everything we needed to do? How good could we really be if we could get rid of the imposter syndrome, if we could get rid of procrastination, if we could just concentrate on change and adapting and being able to adjust? How good could we really be? And so what we've decided to do again as a family is to say, it's 5 of us. We're going to concentrate on the 7 needs that we can work with, that we are good at. And we're going to put that in our wheelhouse, and we're going to do it the best way we can. We're going to live it first, and then we're going to share it. And when you were talking about the family structure, as far as how family is an integral part of it, the reason that family and business has to go in hand is because right now, it's easy if you have a structure to say, I can go out and just do my thing, and somebody just comes along and says, hey, you're good at this, and they pull you with them. In the Black community, that doesn't happen. We don't have people tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, come on, I see what you're doing. I want to help you. We never get that, ever. My wife, we laugh about it. She's a project manager. As a matter of fact, if anything, she gets, or a friend of hers called and she gets like 100 million more projects than she needs and says, well, you should be able to do this just because. And we just laugh about it. It's like, geez, this stuff is it's just hilarious at the point of it's the opposite.
Complete opposite, where your success becomes more of a hindrance almost, as in your journey, versus opening another door. So you've got to manage all kinds of directions.
Right. So part of it is just saying, okay, as a thought leader, and we're thought leaders, right?
Absolutely.
And so we say, okay, so why don't we take some of the stuff that's going on and just reverse the attitude of it, re-engineer it that works for us, that works in our stuff. And part of it is, say my family, just take us, it's 5 of us, 5 professionals. If we just took our salaries and put them together, we're wealthy. Then we said, if we invest a portion of that together, we can build a legacy house. We can have a home here, a home in Chicago. Then we start saying, okay, what do the kids need? So let's invest for their future now. So we all put in the pot for them. So these are things that we don't just individually say, well, I'm successful, but we say collectively, this is what we're going to do for the family. Then we say, well, instead of we're pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, let's all contribute to the success of the other. When I'm out selling those 2 books, I can sell my wife's ABC book. This ABC Egypt, which is not only learning ABCs for kids, but it's learning for kids, especially kids that have like A is for Africa. So it's kids that say, well, your first learning, you can have the pride of learning and learning who you are. My granddaughter, she's 3, she loves that.
Yeah, to rebuild identity in the midst of
exactly
a dominant society that is silently programmed and overtly with racist beliefs. Because it's about what's that one? Magic Door.
Magic Door to Egypt. Those 2 girls, that's Dina and Dominique, my 2 daughters.
Oh.
They take a magical trip to Egypt, and they learn about the history of Africa. So they gain pride at the same time while they're reading, and the kids look like them. Now that one was for 4th grade. This is for 4th grade, 3rd and 4th grade. The same version is for 6th and 7th grade, but it's called Egypt, Dawson twins. Now see those 2 girls there?
Yeah.
And the boy is Mario. And the girl is Dominique. And she's playing the twins, the Dawson twins.
Wow.
So again, this is the 6th grade version, middle school version, where when my wife was looking for books for our kids, she wanted books that they would be interested in reading and have pride in, and she couldn't find them.
Yeah.
I said, well, why don't you write them?
Perfect.
There you go. I said, let's be part of the solution. 90% is on the solution, 10% on the problem.
Yes. That's such a powerful attitude, right? I mean, I know we're bumping up against time here.
I told you that would happen.
I love it. I feel so grateful. And this has been so rich and so rich. I could keep.
We can do it, and we can do it again. I mean,
I would love that.
I mean, we could do it regular. I mean, I don't care. It's easy because it's so much to talk about. There's so many things that are sincerely that's pressing. Like as a male, I used to go to schools everywhere, and I would
as a speaker.
Yeah, because people say, well, you have all the sales skills. Why are you back in the school speaking? I said, because that's where I'm needed at. I need little boys to see a guy who was a top salesman in corporate America. This is what he looks like. This is who he is. And because I had 3 kids, and even though my kids were considered quote unquote middle class kids, I knew when my son grew up, when this young man grew up, and he's driving around, he's an engineer now, but it's times when the cops brought him to my house because I had gone to the local police in my town. I said, if something ever happened, bring my son to me. And 2 or 3 times they brought him to me.
They did that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Instead of giving him a record. And when he became, he worked at NASA at and you had to have the highest security. He called me and he said, Dad, I see why you did what you did, because I could never have gotten this job if anything would have been on my record. I said, son, let me tell you, the thing that hurts most African-American boys is some little thing that happens when they're 14, 15, and 16. I said, in some communities, they have the parents come up and they talk to the kids. In our community, they call us after they arrest you. So I said, I can't have that happen to you because that's going to destroy every other opportunity you had. And this was just talking to my white peers in corporate America. I learned these things. And so
you learned from your peers in corporate America about how they handle raising teenagers in terms of
exactly
the strategies they take by, like, the idea of being proactive and going and talking to the local police,
yeah,
building
yeah,
a relationship, and
exactly,
them.
Exactly. And then I took that and brought it back home, as well as like in my book, most of the things I learned, like sending our kids to college, like saving up, and like one of the stories I tell is one of my managers, uh, he was probably 2 or 3 years older than me, and he was one of my sales managers, and we were having lunch together on sales calls, and he got up, and back then he had to go to the phone, and he went to the phone, and when he came back, I said, "Hey, was it important? What was the call?" He said, "Oh, I just called my stockbroker." I said, "Your stockbroker?" I said, first of all, didn't know anything about a stockbroker and all that. So I asked him, I just said, "What is your net worth?" What he said, "Oh, I'm worth $250,000. And then he started sitting down, and he was only like 28, 29 years old. And he started writing on this napkin. And he was showing me how annuities and mutual funds and stock. And he said, by the time I reach 50, he said, I'll be worth $1 million. And my eyes almost popped out of my head because I had never heard anybody, a normal person, just a regular person, say they were going to be a millionaire. So
wow.
He wrote on this napkin this strategy, right? So what do you think I did with that napkin when we got up to leave the table?
Kept it.
I put it in my pocket. And I brought it home to Donna, and I said, "Look, so-and-so just showed me how we could become millionaires." I said, so we took the strategy and we started using it in our lives. And now this boss that I was talking about, he's a vice president of a major corporation, a Fortune 500 company. And he had me speak about 2 months ago at his company. And I told that story about what he did for me when we were younger. And I gave them 3 examples of how he showed me through his life of being a white male, how I could translate that into my life to make an advantage for me. And he was sitting there and he cried, because it was a Zoom thing, and his wife, and after the thing, his wife and they called and they said they were both in tears because they had never had anybody just share that he made that big of a difference. And I said, that's what we need. I said, if we had people that actually sincerely cared, we could excel.
Yes.
Because
and without an inherent hierarchy, like I'm better than you and I'm reaching down to help you out, but from a genuine heart to heart, human to human, I truly care and want to help make things better. I don't know what to do, right? Because so many white people, I'm hearing that so many white people starting last summer are saying they feel bad for even being white all of a sudden, and they want to know what they can do.
Well, you need people like me. That's why I say you can talk to me anytime, because you have an audience that you can get the message to people, and you have a person that you can talk to about it that can help share from a male perspective.
Yes, and from corporate America perspective.
Right. But it's harder for me, believe it or not, to get through to corporate America, to get in to tell this story, than it is for somebody else to bring me there.
Yeah.
Because so it's the same. So it's the same thing. I have a wealth of information, but you have to get to the right, like every place that I've ever been, to get to the right situation where you can get it to the right people. is difficult. I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more. I was in Chicago, Wrigley, Wrigley spearmint gum?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was at a school in the Black community, and Wrigley had adopted a school.
The Wrigley Foundation,
the Wrigley Foundation at the on the south side of Chicago. So I was one of the primary consultants back when there was a lot of issues going on with violence in the 90s, because they were having kids getting shot going to school, on their way to school. So they found out about my book, Silent Cry, The Key to Stopping the Violence. So they made me a consultant. So I was at this event, and at this event was William Wrigley Jr., which is the son. So we were the exact same age, and he had heard about me, and he walked up to me, and this is what he said. We were both 34 years old at the time. He said, I admire everything that you're doing. He said, everything that I've gotten, I've been given through legacy, generation. And he said, everything that you're doing, you're earning. He said, I would love to stay in touch with you. Here's my card. Anything that you need, please call. While he was saying that, the eyes of his, you can imagine his people that's around.
His entourage.
His entourage was like shaking their head like, you ain't getting nowhere near him. When I would call, they would block the call. He never got my calls. He never got anything from me. And that's where I had three major people in Chicago. Kuppenheimer, one of the biggest foundations, he heard me speak. He said, I want that guy. He said, he was in the audience. I didn't even know. And he heard me speak, and I knew nothing about it. One day, one of the teachers called. She said, it's a doggone shame that Oppenheimer, and I think one of the richest people in the world, definitely in Chicago,
yeah,
wanted to meet you personally, and the principal blocked it. Because she said, I am not introducing him to that. And she used the N-word. And a black teacher, pulled me to the side later and told me about it. And so even those type of stories where the people that want to help you are so high up, but they got levels between them, and people hate on you, and people stop you, and people block.
Well, because that's what racism really is.
Yeah.
Seed is it's hate that is cloaked in fear, or fear cloaked in hate. They're like so tightly in there, and people don't even realize it's running their show, which is tragic.
Yeah.
Of how it but this is, I have not heard this I've just been doing this work around racial equity for 12 years, waking up to my own whiteness. And I refer to myself, when I work with organizations, like I said, my friend and colleague, Erica Merritt, and I co-facilitate as a cross-racial team, because white folks can hear from me more clearly around certain messages, and black folks, from her.
Right.
And I've never heard this story in particular. And it's interesting because Cleveland, in Northeast Ohio in general, has a large foundation community as well. But to hear the story of people at the top genuinely, sincerely wanting to connect you, and the people in between hating and blocking you out.
Yeah. And that was unique. And I wrote about both of those experiences where, because if you're out there and you have a message, I spoke over 1,200 times just in the Chicago, Illinois area, because I had to always be home. So I would always make sure that I took local. So I carved out a career and sent my kids through college and spoke for 15 years, all locally, and still was able to make a life. It was just hustle and grit and being versatile. You know, I could speak at associations. I could do sales meetings for real estate people. My perfect day, I spoke at a grade school in the morning. I spoke at a college campus in the afternoon, and I spoke at a business association in the evening.
And still was home at 2:30 for the
And
kids.
still, yeah, in between, I was still at home to make sure that the kids got home and did everything, and then I get back on the road again. But I would speak sometimes 30 times a month and just be out. And I have it on tape. That's why I'm listening to these tapes. I'm like, God, at one tape, I was like, this is my 32nd engagement this month. And I'm like, I was just hustling, run, but it was the joy of being, not being known, famous, but just having a message that I needed to get out.
Yes, you were giving your gift. I mean, when I hear that story of how much what one whole day, talk about a rich life, right? Talk about an integrated life. Talk about a life where there's harmony between the work life and the home life.
Yeah.
That day seems, like you said, like a perfect ultimate day where you are fully giving the gift of the entirety of who you are, because clearly you are here to serve a message.
Yeah.
And you are a living message. You're a living testament of that message.
And even in all that, Adele, even in all that, I gave up. And that's the other part of the story where I said, nobody's listening. Like, I remember when they told me in Chicago, this is what they said. They said, oh, violence is, nobody needs to hear that anymore. This was African-American teachers. They were like, oh, these kids are fine now because the gang activity had died down. And I started saying, okay, I can't get into corporations because I don't have the connections. I have the experience, but I'm experiencing the same thing that I experienced on job interviews.
The racism.
Right. So I said, corporate America speaking it, and everybody wanted, like Brian Tracy, when those guys would come in Chicago, I would work their shows. So I knew everybody on Brian Tracy's staff. That's how he wrote the blurb on my book. But everybody wanted you to speak like Brian Tracy, where I'm a mix between a Les Brown and Brian Tracy. I can do both. So I would go to Nightingale Conan. You ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
They were in Chicago. And I would talk to them about producing my work. And I was like before my time. This was like the early mid 90s. And they were used to having the Brian Tracy's and you know all the guys. I can name them.
Yeah, I know all the white guys.
Yeah, all the guys and they were like.
And it's still kind of that way.
Yeah,
right now with all the YouTube people.
Yeah, and I would come in. I was like, but I have a message that can transcend, and they couldn't see it. Like nobody wanted to invest in that message of you have all of these backgrounds, and you can do a straight sales message. You can do a straight message to young people. You could do a straight message about family. You could do a straight message about. I'm like, you're
multilingual, right? Like
right.
you can connect with all these different audiences. Right. You know how to code switch, and you have an authentic story for each of those audiences.
Exactly. And my story, depending on where I was going, it would either be this story, something out of here, or something out of here. You know, the 10 principles for taking responsibility for your own success. Out of here, I have this book was used as recommended reading in 2 high schools in Chicago, where every student had to have a copy of this.
Really?
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
And then it was a bank that was using this as reading for all the bankers. So it was that diverse where both groups could use it. But as I kept going out, and when you're on your own, being an entrepreneur, you by yourself.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, am I really doing it? Like we didn't, this was before social media. I mean, I was back in the day when you would collect, this is a funny story. I was back in the day when you would collect business cards and you put them in and you send an email and the email was spam, because back then viruses would be in the email system. So if you sent out more than 20 emails at a time, so I would call my wife and I would be in tears. I'm like, honey, I sent out an email and it went to some people 200 times and they're like, never email me again. you know?
Oh.
So I was like, and she was my adjunct IT person, but she would be on at work on a, she's like, I can't talk to you right now. I'm at work. I'll be sitting there like, ah.
Oh.
Uh, so yeah, so
But you, when you gave up, you started telling me you gave up. What
yeah. I went back. I'm glad that you asked that question. I went back because I could always go back to corporate sales. So I went back to a little small company called FedEx.
Just a little tiny one.
Little tiny company. And I threw this book at the guy that was interviewing me, and I just put it on the table. He said, man, you can go anywhere you want in this company. And he hired me on the spot. And I would go on corporate America to hide. I said, I can make 6 figures and hide in corporate America as a salesperson, but that wasn't my true calling, because I had actually saved people's lives doing the other stuff. So when I was in corporate America, I was one of the top 20%, 15% at FedEx. They found out about this stuff because I never talked about this anymore.
The Silent City part, that early part of your life, your journey. You only
anything.
talked about your knowledge, but not your journey now.
Exactly. Never talked about my journey. They didn't know I was a speaker. They didn't know anything about my previous career that I had been speaking for 15 years. So one day, one of the top bosses heard about me. And this is what he said. He walked up to me and he said, man, I heard about what you used to do. He said, why are you working for us? He said, you should be training us. And I just looked at him, and because I had given up that. I had stopped. I didn't want to tell him, you know what? I don't have that anymore. And I didn't know how to explain that I was here hiding from that, because to do that, calling is tough. To do this, you have to be on your game. You have
all the time. You are creating. You are the structure. You are the revenue floor. You are the sales. You are the whole business.
I came home one day and I told my wife, I said, honey, I just signed 150 books at a book signing. Her hair was all over her head. She said, EJ, I got to put the kids to sleep. She never had time to listen to it. So she would say, oh, by the way, can you take the garbage out? And I would be like, do you know who I am? And she
said, yes.
She said, yeah, you get the garbage,
take the garbage out.
Yeah. And it was just like, back then I said to her, I want to do a video, a day in the life of what I go through. I said, it would be amazing if people just knew. This is before social media. This is before, I was just going to videotape it. And so a news channel did a little sting on me. It's on YouTube. It's called Someone You Should Know. And they taped like a little 4-minute segment or something. And it was just about me coming from the inner city. But I had this corporate background. But I had left corporate America to go out to speak to people. And people started getting wind of that. But you got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. So it's always been one of those things where you had these different lives, and I compartmentalized.
Right.
Then I could go into the inner city. Like I got guys, they know me from being in the neighborhood, and they like, man, you was a tough dude back, you know, you was an athlete, we thought you was gonna play pro ball, you was the one who everybody wanted to make it, because we always had those people who we said that's gonna be the one. And then some guys are like, man, you was always that smart guy who always was a step. You like knew something that other people didn't know. And I said, yeah, that's what got me out of here. That was the thing that made it where I escaped the drugs and I was shot at gunpoint, a knife point. I've been accosted at gunpoint, a knife point at least 15 times in my life. And I say only a cat has 9 lives. I've had 15.
That's the edge.
I beat a cat, man. You can beat a cat. So yeah. So I'm just again at this point trying to say, I told my family, I said, I'm going to get you guys a little bit of what I had, and that'll be my joy. If I can get you to help people. I said, I've had people call me and they call you everything but Jesus because they believe in what you're doing. I said, I've experienced all of that with kids. I have stacks of letters from kids writing me, you know, saying, you touched me, regardless of the race of the kid. I've had white kids tell me, they say, you know, this little white, it always sticks in my mind. He said, because he was out in Naperville, Illinois, which is an all-white area in Chicago suburb. And after I spoke to the kids, they would say, what's funny, their parents, they say, my parents try to pretend like nothing goes on out here. They say, you know, we do drugs all the time and they just don't care because they don't want to care. They don't want to listen to us. They say, you're the first guy that's coming in here talking to us about reality, about what's going on, and everybody else just let us do what we want to do because they don't want to face it. And I just thought that was, and it was like a little 7th grade boy. And he was just reaching out saying, finally, somebody is addressing, because I would come to talk to them, and I would talk to Black kids differently. Black kids, I would talk about gangs, violence. White kids, I would talk about drinking and driving, taking pills, doing things. Like I knew which community, what story, because I had stories for both.
Right, because you're multilingual.
Yeah, I would just, you know, adjust to what was going on, but still relate. And if you go, I have a thing on YouTube. It was like 3 minutes of just me, all pictures of events that I was doing. And you'll see most of them were just as many white students as Black students talking to, and the diversity of being able to go to any environment and actually deliver a message. Because once people see you and connect with you, they enjoy you, but it's getting to that. It's getting that door open. You know, that's the thing. And I think more people would have more similarities if they were able to meet someone of another race and actually be able to talk to them. They would see that and maybe that's the biggest threat though, because
to build relationships.
To build relationships is a threat to some people, because that would show that, you know what, we're not that much different, you know? And so that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
I love it. And yes, I mean, that could be another whole conversation of why is it so hard for Black people and white people to connect around these lines of difference that are socially constructed anyway. I mean, that's another whole story. That's part of what Erica and I teach, is that this whole thing of race was made up, and now it's become real because it was made to be real, that we have to undo it. And part of that is building relationship across these lines of artificial difference.
So it's a lot now, because we went to Africa a year ago.
What country did you go to?
We were in Ghana.
Wow,
we started off in Ghana because that's where my cousins have been back there 23 times. So my wife wanted to go, and we went to actually to the slave dungeons, and it just totally just opened our eyes to what, like like I was in this door, and the door is about this wide, and you had to be this wide to get through it. If you were any bigger, they wouldn't let you go because they wanted to make sure that you starved enough where you couldn't fight back on the journey over here. So it was a system, and every door that you went through, they kept you in a place for a month, and then you had to crawl through another door. So they systematically broke them mentally and physically before the journey.
Oh my goodness.
And so we were in the last room, the last chamber. And if you couldn't fit through that door, you had to stay in there until you were skinny enough to go through the door. And I have a picture of myself. I had to turn sideways like this to the door of the no, they call it the door no return. And that voyage and that story, we're going to do a documentary on, me and my wife, of just the journey of us as a normal couple going over, and just what we see and what it means. Because she said to me, she said, I've never seen you this comfortable. I said, well, all the policemen look like me. I said, I've never been in a situation where everybody looked like me and they're coming and shaking my hand. They're not coming looking at me in a suspicion, but they're coming over actually just saying, oh, you're from America, you know. And I said, I've never experienced this before, ever. And I'm in my 50s, and I said, this is the first time I've ever been in a situation where I'm totally at ease with everything around me. Like I don't have to fight, I don't have to protect, because usually we went to Dollywood and I broke out in hives.
Oh my gosh.
She took me in the mountains. I'm like, I'm in the mountains of where? And my wife she always says these vacations, not understanding that she got a husband that's Black.
And you're not only, from what I've learned, you're very tall.
6'2".
And you have a presence.
I'm built like an athlete.
Right, which is, it's kind of like the same dynamic of you being successful in corporate America.
Exactly.
If you looked, if even as a Black man, if you had a different look, you would be even less threatening. But
right, yeah. I mean, the whites, when I was in corporate, they equated me to Michael Jordan because I was dark skinned, tall, smile.
Yeah, handsome.
Yeah,
so charming, charismatic to be a salesperson.
Exactly. So back in that day, and being the best. So, and I tell a lot of stories about how many people we did have the heart to hearts, because you had to, I call it professional etiquette, where you break down those walls so they'll do business with you. So I had to address who I was and where I came from so that there would be an understanding of us just doing business.
And you probably had to do it all the time.
I had to do it all the time, but that became my signature story because I also reveled in being a storyteller and telling, because I'm an athlete. So I had a lot of success in college, high school football. I was like you say, I wasn't short for girlfriends or, having that sort of thing. I even told my wife, I said, boy, it's tough being me. I said, every time I go on a sales call, being that Black guy, people who have never met a Black guy, I change people's impressions of, people would actually go, I've never been around a Black guy, and you come in, you're articulate, you're smart, you know what you're doing, you're funny, you're a great husband. They say, that's very attractive. Give me a hug. I said, I hug.
Wait, were they often white women?
Yeah, I said, I hug so many white women every day. I said, I'm just sick of it. I said, I'm tired of hugging all these women every day. I come in the doctor's office, I got to hug the whole staff. Oh, no. And I would make fun of it. And I would, because I was the guy who could do it, I was the guy who the coaches said, we want you to come play in Iowa because we know your coach said you could make that transition being in a white town. And I was the guy who people say, I want another EJ Bassette. I want that guy.
But because I'll be a little edgy, because you know what, you make white people comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's what because working across race, that's where, that book that came out a few years ago, I'm not the biggest fan, with all due respect, White Fragility.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of that. Are you familiar with that book? Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I haven't read. Yeah.
And it's written by a white woman, Robin DiAngelo. But because white people just are plain out uncomfortable, I learned the statistic that so in America, over 70% of white Americans have never met a Black person.
Wow.
And so the main exposure that white people have to Black people are through the media.
Yeah, through the media, right.
And the media portrays, there's two types of Black people allowed on the media. There's either superstars.
Yeah. Whether
they're, in the music industry, in the sports industry,
right.
or portrayed as criminals.
Right.
And so all that media goes into our psychology, all of our psychology, right? It's feeding all of our subconscious. Yeah. And so either somebody who's a superstar, which usually evokes envy, or a criminal, which evokes fear. So the media just perpetuates stereotypes that perpetuate separation. Right. So then even if I have the chance to meet somebody in person who's Black, like you telling those stories, I'm now coming in with those either envy or fear, right? So you do a noble job of helping white people be comfortable, but the hard thing for white people is we cannot always wait for some person of color, some Black person to make us comfortable. We got to learn how to disrupt our own thought patterns. That's my perspective.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And I would tell people all the time, even in speaking engagements, this is what I would say. I say, I'm afraid of myself, according to the news. I say, well, if I didn't know who I was or who my friends are, I would be absolutely terrified. And the psychology of it is that there's a lot of Black people who are afraid of other Black people because it's crept into our psyche too.
Yeah, it's called internalized racism. Exactly. Like we all have it. That's why I say to white people, look, I'm recovering from racism. I say it's impossible to not have these beliefs inside you because it's in the air, it's in the water, it's being perpetuated to all of us all the time.
Exactly.
And depending on how we walk in the world, is like if I'm white and I hear that message, it's going to affect me one way. If I'm Black and I'm walking in the world, that same message, right, it gets internalized and has a different effect on me because it's telling me that I'm less than. It's telling a Black person you're less than. It's telling a white person you're better than.
Right. And that's exactly where part of my family, the business structure I'm doing is to try to address some of this. Since I got a daughter, like I said, who's a nurse practitioner in the health end, and having a wife that's a project manager and all this stuff. So all of us are corporate people. So we deal with people other than us ourselves all day. So,
you know how to code. If you've made it in the corporate world as a Black American, you know how to code switch very well.
And we're all. And my daughter, the fashion design major, she laughed because she worked for a major department store when she first came out of college. She went to Columbia in Chicago for fashion design. So she wanted to be a buyer in corporate America. So she was a manager downtown Chicago for this major store. And in the store, as a manager, she said they taught her how to pick and fire Black people. She said it was amazing. She said because she was in that circle as a manager, she said they clearly said, this is what we're going to do. We're going after this person, this person, this person, which all will be Black. She said, you start harassing them, you start writing them up, and you start getting rid of them. And she was like, because she would come home to us and we would have to answer these questions for her as a young 20-something-year-old manager. And we're saying, okay, now that you're in corporate America, it's not designed for you. So because you're in the management structure, you're going to be privy to stuff and you're expected to go along with that because that's what people do to survive. They become null to, even if it's say hiring practices, or like every Black manager knows if they go on to corporate America, they ain't hiring another Black person.
Right. You just got to check the box with you.
Yep. They just go and all
close the door behind you.
Look, I have gone into situations and I got friends that's in management. I'm like, dude, can you get me in? They be like, dude, you know I can't do it. So we talk about it in the community. So until you're in a situation like I was, where I just walked away from it and said, hey, I'll do this. I'll do something else, and I'll do something that gives me more value. Until you get to that point where you can do these type of things. But most people are not going to. I walked away from 3 Fortune 500 companies that I was doing well in. Pursue something. And most people, and I also walked away when I was a college athlete. If going back into the articles and the magazines, I was one of the guys that was slated to go professional. And my senior year, I was on track to break 2 major records in my school. That would have given me national publicity. But the football secretary or office manager came to me and she said, EJ, the scouts are coming up here and the coaches are not bringing your name up to them. And I said, all this work that I'm doing, this is my senior year. And they're promoting certain players and not other players. And so I decided in my mind that I had to use this instead of that athletic part of what I had. So my senior year, during the season, I walked off the field. In the middle of the game, 4-year scholarship player. I started 3.5 years. And I said, I'm going home to study. Because my best friends were back in the city in trouble and getting shot and doing it. And I said, you know what? I can be a better help to them using this versus just being an athlete to make it. And so, and then some of the Black players on the team wasn't getting the opportunity to play. And so I told them, I said, you know what? I'm willing to give all of this up for the thing that's right. And I said, we can either protest, and none of them, they were all afraid. I said, I'm the one with the most to lose. I'm the captain of the football team and a starter. And everybody else was afraid. So I said, well, I'm going to show you how it's done. And I walked off the field. Now, years later, guys in college still call. They say, man, it took one guy I just saw. I was in Chicago with my grandson's first birthday. And a guy said, man, I never understood what you did until 20 years later.
Wow.
He said, when I started seeing all this stuff with George Floyd and everything, he said, man, you were so far ahead of your time in what you were thinking and doing and the statements you were making. To give up what you love, you worked your whole life to get here, but you were willing to move and change on a dime and I said, yeah. I said, also, I had started reading reports that were saying that we were damaging our brain cells too.
Oh, you knew. So you've always been a futurist, Edge.
Yeah.
You've always been a vision.
They had to sign a form. They had to sign a form in the 80s. And it was the first time out of my 4 years, my senior year, they had us, they sent a document around And we were all in the meetings, 100 guys on the team. And they had us sign, look at a form, and the form said, you are going to kill brain cells that will never regenerate. And I sat there and I looked at a guy that was next to me, and he was a starting player. I said, are you reading what this is saying? And I said, and I went back and did some research, and it was saying once you kill a brain cell, it never regenerates. So going into my senior year, after I signed that document, I already knew I wasn't going to play pro ball. I had already made that decision that that wasn't worth it. But then when the racial part of it was introduced my senior year, I just said in the middle of the game, I said, and this is exactly what we do as entrepreneurs. I didn't have the heart for it. And I was going to get hurt if I went out there one more play and you're not told, because football is a sport where you're physically hitting somebody.
Deep contact, man.
And if you don't, and I was one of the best at it. I was one of those guys who I hit with reckless abandon. I hit like all that, everything I had. People would come to the games just to see. They say it's going to be one play. My nickname was the dog back then. They say it's one play the dog is going to hit, and you just going to stand up and you're going to be like, did he just do that? Because I hit with that type of ferocity. And then now I was in the game and I just said, I can't do it. And it was the middle of the game. And I was like limp. I was almost running around the field like this. Like my hands, I had no desire to be out there. I was like, I couldn't just get it. So I went up to my coach and I said, Coach, I said, thank you for this experience.
The middle of the game.
Middle of the game, yeah. The third quarter, first part of the third quarter. And I said, thank you for the career. I said, I enjoyed it. I said, but I have to go. And he said, go where? I said, I'm going to the locker room and change. He said, dog, wait, what are you doing? I just pulled away from my coach, and he came and tried to grab me again. I said, Coach, and I had tears in my eyes. I said, I can't do it anymore. I said, I can't do it. I said, I gotta go. I went in the locker room. I said a prayer. I cried. And then I went, and my buddies always remind me that they said, dude, you came and sat up in the stands with us. And I stayed for a couple of plays, and they were like, what are you doing? They just saw me on the field.
Oh my gosh.
But this is what I did. I was flunking a class. I had to get out of school or I was going back to the projects. So I went home, I cried in my apartment, and I picked up a book and I said, I'm gonna become a student. And I just sat there and I tried to read it, and I fell asleep because I hadn't read a book in so long because I thought I was going pro. But I said, I'm gonna cheat this last time. But after I cheat on this test, no more. And I went and I became an honor student.
Oh my God.
After that.
Oh my gosh.
And I met this young lady here because it took me 5 years to graduate. So my 5th year, we started dating.
Another blessing of being there 5 years.
Exactly.
Divine order.
Exactly. And I went on and I became, it was the first time I became a leader, not a sports leader, but I tried to be a leader where I went to the library every day for 6 hours. And I was in the library from 5 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night when the library closed. And guys started seeing me in the library, and students started coming to me in private and asking me, how did I pick up these study habits? They said, how did you change? How did you go from being this football player, wild, crazy, women? They say, now you're calm, you have a purpose. It's a different purpose. It's not a sports purpose. It's more of a, they could see the transition. And some of those guys that came to me, I prayed with them in the library. And some of those guys I wrote about in here because they eventually died. Even though they were in college, they couldn't get it together. And when they got out of college, they either still was in drugs, they were still. So the book is not about just inner city Black. It was like we were losing men and women from every walk of life. And I started seeing that back in the 80s. And I said, man, I got to do something because I'm losing all these friends to violence, to drugs, I'm talking about firemen, suicide, abuse. I have in here a mother and daughter died 1 year apart, 1 day apart, 1 day apart. A mother and daughter, some neighbors of mine. The mother was stabbed by her boyfriend. The next day, her daughter found out about it. And while she was grieving, within 3 minutes, her boyfriend came and stabbed her.
Oh my God. Oh, that's horrible.
So it was just.
So, couple questions. We're
Yes.
I want to honor you. Have been, oh my gosh, so
Man,
generous.
this is fun. Isn't this fun?
I could listen to you all day long. So I want this to be continued if you would be so gracious.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I have a couple quick closing up questions here.
Yes.
It was an epic interview. I mean, who needs to watch a movie? We can just listen to it.
Well, we're talking about making this.
Yes. So first question is, how can people find the book? How do people order the book? Where's the best way to order it?
If you go to my Instagram page.
What's your Instagram page?
EJ Bassette.
EJBASSETTE.
Or Bassette Solutions. So those are two. Just EJ Bassette. I have a link tree.
Oh, I see. And your Instagram or Bassette.
So just go into the bio. Yeah, just go into the bio, and the first thing you'll see is author's books on there. Or and they can just order. It's the ordering. You can order right from there.
That is amazing. And then would you say, given that your first book, Silent Cry, is your story, and your second book
is what I know,
is what you know, from your perspective, I don't mean to open another whole chapter here, is the second book solutions to what you experienced in your journey? Exactly.
And the second one is written in a different style. The first one is whatever happened. I wanted to bring you into the projects. I wanted you to smell the smells walking through the hallway. I wanted you to experience me when 15 different times. There was a lady who read the first book, and she saw me and she just grabbed me and she started shaking me. She said, "What was wrong with you? You could have died at least 15 times. She said, "I threw this book down." She said, "I threw it away. I picked it up again." She said, "You almost gave me heart attacks." And I said, as a boy, you think like a boy. As a man, you grow up and you become a man. I said, that's what I was. That was the maturation process of me going from, you're in this environment and you're just a kid.
You go from boyhood to manhood.
Exactly. Now, Practice What You Preach was written from more of a salesperson, corporate, telling a story, but telling it in a different way. Like telling the story of me and my wife, how we switched roles, but we had to come up with a way to say, okay, these kids have to go to sleep at night because we can't function at midnight and they're still up. So I would go on my sales calls and I would talk to my customers and they would say, "Oh, you have to put your kids to bed at 7 o'clock. They're going to cry for a few days, but eventually they'll be on a routine." So I would talk more about how we work together as a family, how we came together with structure, And then how at the same time in corporate America or in my business, I was taking strategies and trying to use them. And if they weren't working, I had to readjust and redo and remake. And at the same time, you have family tragedies, you have things that come into play, uh, and you have to handle all of these different things. So that was kind of where that came from. So that's written from more of a, like I said, there's no language in here. There's a lot of motivational quotes in it. It's a lot of practice points and preach points where you tell the story, you tell people what they should learn from it, and you give them your idea of what you would do about that same problem. So that's where those two came from.
Well, listen, I am looking forward to reading both of them and going online and ordering them. Yeah. And I would like I said, I want to continue this conversation because it's so rich, so multidimensional. And I want to hear another time talking more about family business. And as we mentioned briefly, what you're living is family business as the antidote to so many things in this country. What I hear you saying and living, especially for Black America. And to hear, I love, the story of the Bassettes about talking about dreams and business and legacy and all of the insights that you have to hear more about those, because that is just such so much richness that you have to share. And that richness is all about abundance. So to be continued. Following up next time, I'm going to shut us off and we'll come back. But I just want to thank you, Ed, for being who you are and for being so generous to share your story. And I feel so honored to even know you through this conversation and to continue beyond today.
Man, you're making me blush.
I can't believe that. I mean, given how talented you are, but good. Well,
thank you. It's been a pleasure. So I'm glad we met and everything. And like I said, let's just keep it going. And anything I can do for you, anything I can help with or anything, please let me know.
I absolutely will. Until next time. And everyone, remember, your heart is your most powerful engine for change. Bye for now.
Thank you.